Guten Tag and welcome to PA Dutch 101. This is video 35 in our series. It is a grammar-based video and it will be covering the topic of the present perfect tense. This video and topic is building on quite a lot of the information covered in the previous videos. If you have not seen the previous videos, I would ask you to go back, watch those first, and then jump into this. This is a very extensive topic. It's a lot of information that we're going to be covering in this video, and it's going to seem like there's almost too much information, but I promise you, if you stick with me and if you break this down with me, you should be okay. This is going to be a topic that's going to take a lot of practice, though, on your own part afterwards to really get a good grasp on how the present perfect tense works. Okay? But let's get right into it. The present perfect tense is used in Pennsylvania Dutch when we want to express the past tense. I know it's already off. You're like, why is it called present perfect if it's the past tense? I don't make up the grammar terms. I'm just telling you that it's called the present perfect tense, and we use it for past tense sentences. Okay? Now, how do we form it? In Pennsylvania Dutch, it's always formed with an auxiliary verb and a past participle, and I'll show you what both of those are. There are two auxiliary verbs in Pennsylvania Dutch that are used in this tense. They are hebben and sei. Two verbs we already know how to conjugate, two verbs we've been working with extensively throughout the video series. So those are not new to you. Those are our auxiliary verbs. Now, how do we know which one to use when? Here is the rule. Most times, in all honesty, you're going to be using hebben, but there are times that you are going to use sei, and here's the rule. Sei is only used in situations where there is a change of position or condition. Sometimes I like to tell my students, is there motion going on? Is someone going from one place, or for past tense, has someone gone from one place to another place? If so, that's a change of position or condition. So in that case, we would use sei. This will make much more sense once we actually start practicing this with some sentences, trust me. But for right now, know that if there's not really a change of motion or state, we use hebben. If there is, we use sei. Okay. When forming sentences in the past tense, this is the word order that we need to use. Okay. Subject of the sentence, followed by either hebben or sei, which we just got done talking about. Other stuff, past participle all the way at the end. That will not change. Your past participle will always be at the end of the sentence. Imagine that hebben or sei is acting like a modal. We've done a lot with them. That modals push the verb to the end. Well, hebben or sei in past tense sentences pushes the past participle to the end of the sentence. Okay. If you're asking a question, we're going to use inverted word order like we've learned in the past. So if it's a question, start with your auxiliary, which in this case is hebben or sei, then your subject, other stuff, and then your past participle. Notice the past participle is still at the end. That doesn't change. Okay. Here's an example in Pennsylvania Dutch of a past tense sentence. Ich hab Deutsch gelernt. Here's our subject, our form of hebben or sein, other stuff, and our past participle. Gelernt is the past participle of lernen, which means to learn. So this sentence is saying, I learned Dutch. I learned Pennsylvania Dutch. Okay? So, as you can see, this past participle at the end I haven't read, and our auxiliary form of haben or sein. There's no motion, no change of state going on in this sentence. That's why I don't have sei here. I have hebben. Okay? Here is another example, though. Is nach Canada gevaren. Is nach Canada gevaren. This is a regular sentence, so again we have subject, auxiliary verb, hebben or sein, other stuff, and our past participle. And this time our past participle is gevaren, which is the past participle of the verb varen, which means to drive. So in the past tense, he drove to Canada. Now this time there is a change of state or a change of motion. That's why I have is instead of hebben. So I hope you see the difference between this sentence and why this one has hebben and this one has sei. This one has a change of state or motion. This one does not. Okay, now, how do we form the past participle? Because that's a huge portion of being able to do the past tense. We know how to conjugate hebben or sei, and we now know the word order of our sentences. Now we have to learn how to form past participles. This is going to seem like a lot. It's not that difficult, though. There's a lot of extra stuff going on here, but really all verbs can be broken into two categories, either regular or irregulars. And there's a key there, because the past participles of regulars are different from the past participle irregulars, so we need to break them down. Let's look at the regular verbs first. These are the easier ones. If you are dealing with a regular verb to form a past participle, you do this. First off, we know that all verbs in Pennsylvania Dutch end in the letter E. Rule number one, take that E away. You're left with your stem, right? The next thing you do, add the letters GE to the front of the stem. Rule number three, add a T to the end of the stem. That's it. This is your equation for forming a past participle with regular verbs. GE, stem, T. Stop. That's it. Okay? An example, mache, to do or to make, is a regular verb. Past tense, the past participle, drop the E, we're left with M-A-C-H, add a GE to the front, add a T to the end. Gemacht. Done. That's it. Okay? This doesn't really change much. Okay? The rule is add the GE, add the T with regular verbs. Okay? I like to tell my students that the past participle and the present perfect tense I usually refer to as the GE tense, because almost all of our past participles start with GE. It's a quick reminder, oh yeah, we're GE, we're talking past tense, we're talking past participles. If that helps, use it. Okay. Now, sadly, the irregular verbs category is not quite as nice and neat as the regular verbs, and that's usually the case all the time with these guys. They have their own set of rules when forming a past participle. Okay? First off, rule number one is exactly the same. Drop the E off. You're left with the stem. Add GE to the front. Hey, that's not bad. That's exactly like the regulars. This time, add an E to the end. So, where the regular verbs added a T, irregulars add an E. So your equation, so to speak, for irregular verbs is GE plus stem plus E. An example, the verb lese, which means to read. That is an irregular verb. It turns into gelese, gelese in the past participle. There's an E on the end because it's irregular. Now, here's what we need to remember, and this is where these guys are not, they don't play very nicely. In most irregular verbs, the stem also changes its spelling, hence irregular. These can be tricky. An example, we have the verb laufe, to walk, to go, in some circles to run as well. The past participle of laufe, we take the E away, add a GE, and put an E back. But notice, this is one that changes its spelling. It goes from laufe to geluffe. Geluffe. Now, you're going to ask me, why in the world did it do that? And my simple answer to you is, because it does. And that's where we're going to leave it at. I mean, if we look at language history, we can go back and see that there are reasons why it does this, but we don't need to worry about that. All I need you to worry about is to know that that's what it does, and that's what it changes to. Okay? Here's the deal. And I've said this before with other topics in the video series. Irregular verbs and their past participles must be memorized or looked up in a dictionary. You can't just guess. You can, but it's usually going to lead to failure. Look the word up. What's really nice, and I'll talk about this a little later in the video, is that either of the dictionaries that I advertised at the beginning of the video series, the Beam Dictionary or the Stein Dictionary, both of those have the past participles of verbs printed in the dictionaries. That's nice. So if you get a verb like laufe and you're not quite sure if it's regular or irregular, look it up in a dictionary. It'll give you the past participle to show you that, oh, this is one that changes spelling. As you encounter more and more irregular verbs, you need to memorize the past participle now as well. Okay? And you'll start to know them and memorize them as well the more that you use them, of course. Okay. There are some extra rules that we need to cover, and we've encountered these types of rules before with verbs, with letter changes and so forth. This is going to seem like a quite crazy list. Just stick with me on this, all right? If you are using a regular verb and it ends in a consonant plus the combination LE, you want to drop the E and add an E before the L and then add T. An example, you won't encounter this often, but you will from time to time. That's why I want to make sure that you understand it. Here's a verb, rechnen, to calculate. Rechnen is a regular verb, but it falls into this special category. It has a consonant and then an L and then an E. This extra rule or special rule tells us that when we're forming the past participle, instead of just throwing a T on the end, we add an E between the two consonants. And the reason for that is because of pronunciation purposes. If you were to just take that E away and add a T and add the G in front, you would get gerechelt. No, you can't. Gerechelt. It's difficult to say. Adding that extra E there makes it easy to say. Gerechelt. Imagine that E not being there, and remembering you got to pronounce all the letters. Going from CH sound to L to T with no vowels in between is extremely difficult, if not impossible to do. So we add an extra E. Again, you don't encounter this often, but you will, so I want to make sure that you know what you have to do. Here's another situation. If you're dealing with a regular verb whose stem ends in D, so when you take that E away and it ends in a D, change the D to a T. And we've seen this before in other situations with verbs. Take the verb deide, for example. Deide means to point. Okay? Now, when you drop that E off, you're left with a D. But this rule tells us change that to a T. Alright? And then you stop. Past participle of deide is gedeiht. Gedeiht. Okay? Again, often? No. Will you encounter it? Yes. If you're dealing with a regular verb whose stem ends in a double D, change the double D to a double T. For example, the verb antwoorden, which means to answer, antwoorden. That ends in a double D once you drop that E off. The rule tells us, change it to double T. So the past participle of antwoorden, geantwoord. Geantwoord. Okay? Again, often? No. Will you encounter it? Yes. There's more. If you're dealing with a verb that begins with the letters H, F, and S, note, only take a G in the past participle instead of GE. Okay? For example, hese, to call. That starts with an H. The rule tells us we don't put a GE in front of it, we just put a G. And when this happens, and this is important, when you have a GH combination at the beginning of a verb, the sound that the GH makes is a K. This is different and a little weird at first, but you'll get used to it. So, hese is the infinitive, to call, to be called. When we put that in the past participle, we get GHEESE. That gets pronounced kese. Kese. Another one that you'll hear a lot, ironically, is the verb to hear. Here. H-E-E-R-E. When you put that in the past tense, it's G-H-E-E-R-T. Keert. Keert is how you pronounce that past participle. So make note of that. That's important. Here's another example. Sitze, to sit. That starts with an S, so we just put a G. Gesotze. Gesotze. And schwätze, to talk, just add a G because it starts with an H. Geschwätzt. 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 Okay? So this is an important one, especially this point right here, for pronunciation purposes. You will get a funny look if you try to pronounce that Gehese. In fact, some people might not even understand what you're trying to say. Gehese. It's Käse. Okay? Got to make that remembrance that GH makes a K sound. Also, note, the prefix GE, I'm sorry, there's a lot of extra stuff here, but we have to cover it because it happens. The prefix GE is dropped altogether before some stems beginning with the letter G. For example, the verb gebe, to give, does not get an extra GE put in front of it. The past participle of gebe is gebe. Geh, to go, or to walk. The past participle of geh is gange. Gange. Now, that's just the way it is. That's my answer. I know you're probably thinking to yourself, what the heck? All this extra stuff I have to worry about? Yep, yeah you do. And again, I'm going to keep coming back to the fact that the more you use these, you'll quickly start getting used to remembering or knowing that, oh, it's gange, or it's gebe, or it's gesotze. But that takes practice. I don't expect you at the end of this video to really comprehend all of this stuff and all these extra rules right like that, because it takes practice to get used to it. Okay, so don't get frustrated. I guess that's the key point here. Don't get frustrated. Okay, I'm not done. There's some more extra rules. We also do not add a GE to a verb with an inseparable prefix. A lot of times I'll just tell my students, if you're dealing with a verb that starts with VER or BE, they are no GE verbs. They do not get a GE. Okay? For the example, versteh, to understand something, the past participle is verstanden. Verstanden. Bezahle, to pay, bezahlt. No GE, bezahlt. Another extra thing to worry about. If a verb has a separable prefix, and we've worked with these before, there was a previous video, the prefix is attached to the front of the past participle. Notice your GE gets put in between the prefix and the stem. For example, aufsteh, to stand up. Normally in a present tense sentence, this oof part breaks off, goes to the end of a sentence. We covered that before. But when we're putting these in the past tense, putting it into a past participle, the GE, or in this case just the G, because the stem begins with an S, goes in between the prefix and the stem. So we get aufsteh becomes aufgestanden. Aufgestanden. Here's another example. Rumlaufen, to run around, to walk around. Normally the rum would break off. And it still does, but it comes back together then with the GE in the middle. Rumgelaufen. Rumgelaufen. So inseparable prefixes, no GE. Separable prefixes, the GE goes between the prefix and the stem. That's it, as far as rules and extra stuff. And again, it does seem like a lot. Now, when building sentences in the present perfect tense, it is vital that you are able to form the past participle. You need to be able to take all those rules I just covered when you're working with verbs and be able to apply them. Because if you're not forming the past participle correctly, then you're not speaking or writing correctly either. Okay? It'd be the example if we had the verb to run in English and someone said, man, I just run that race. I think most English speakers would understand what you mean. You runned that race, okay, I get it. But we know that that's not the case. I ran the race, all right? There's an example of an irregular past participle in English. So we have them in English. You do them without thinking and speaking English because you do. We got to get to the point where you're doing it in Pennsylvania Dutch without thinking, although that's down the road. Don't expect to be able to just do that. I don't expect anybody to be able to just do that. It takes practice. Okay? And here, and I've mentioned this before previously in the video, I'm going to say it again. This is where having one of those dictionaries is extremely helpful because all of the dictionaries, whether it's the Stein, whether it's the Beam, whether it's the Beam comprehensive one, which is like 12 volumes long, or even in my textbook, in the back of the textbook, we have a mini dictionary in there. They always give you the past participle with each verb. So for example, if you looked up the verb to go in a Pennsylvania Dutch dictionary, you're going to get to go. They'll give you the present tense form, ge, and then they'll always give you the past participle. And usually, most dictionaries will have in parentheses PP, past participle, to show you that that is the past participle. Past participle of ge is gange. Okay? So, use your dictionaries. Don't be afraid. Alright? Now, as is always the case, psi is different. Psi has its own separate past tense. What? Yes, it does. So, you can form psi in the present perfect tense like what we were just doing. If you were to do that, it would be psi plus gewesen. Gewesen is the past participle of psi. But most, if not all, Pennsylvania Dutch speakers that I know and I've ever encountered will always use this following form for the past tense of psi instead of ist gewesen. Can you say this and use it? Like if you want to say, I was 10 years old, ich bin 10 Jahre alt gewesen. Sure, You can say that, and people will understand you. But nobody says that. They're going to use this form. Ich war 10 Jahre alt. Here's the deal. The past tense of sei that almost all Pennsylvania Dutch speakers use, I have it broken down here and conjugated for you in the chart. Ich war, du warst, CNS war, mir wara, dir wart, sie wara. Memorize this. This is the one you want to use. Anytime you find yourself wanting to say something like was, use this form. I'm not telling you not to use this form, but nobody really does. So you're going to hear this way before you ever hear this from another speaker. Okay, so I want you to be aware of that. Let's actually use this a little bit now. So we have a present tense sentence. Die Susan fragt ihr Daddy. So Susan is asking her dad something. We don't know what. To put this in the present perfect tense, we follow our equation and all the rules that we talked about. Frohe is our verb. So if we don't know if that's a regular or irregular, look it up in the dictionary and it'll tell you. I'm telling you that it is a regular verb. So we give our form of habe or sei. There's no motion here, no change of state, no change of condition. So we have a form of habe. We put our GE form at the end. Die Susan hat ihr Daddy gefragt. Die Susan hat ihr Daddy gefragt. Now it's past tense. So it goes from Susan is asking her dad to Susan asked her dad, past tense. Okay? Here's another one. Der Chris spielt seine Gitarre. Der Chris spielt seine Gitarre. Spiele is a regular verb. Starts with an S. So remember that in our rules. There's no motion, there's no change of state or condition. So, der Chris hat seine Gitarre gespielt. Der Chris hat seine Gitarre gespielt. Oh, I didn't read the verb here. The verb here is fahren. Der Mann und seine Frau fahren nach Reading. Der Mann und seine Frau fahren nach Reading. So the man and his wife are driving to Reading. Fahren, there's motion, change of state, conditions. This one's going to take sei, and you're going to have to look up the past participle of fahren. If you do, you would get Der Mann und seine Frau sind nach Reading gefahren. Why is it sind? Because we have two people here. Conjugate sei for two people. Change of motion, that's change of state or motion, that's why we're using sei. And we put our GE form at the end. Der Mann und seine Frau sind nach Reading gefahren. The man and his wife drove to Reading. Okay? Couple more. Clip is evening. I'm going to go right to them. I'm not going to give you time to work on it. You can always pause the video and try and figure it out yourself and then check your answer. You're more than welcome to do that. Here's our first sentence to practice. Ich helfe meiner Mutter in der Küche. Ich helfe meiner Mutter in der Küche. I am helping my mother in the kitchen. Helfe is our verb. Helfe is an irregular verb. I'll throw that out there. Put this in the past tense. Ich hab meiner Mutter in der Küche geholfen. Ich hab meiner Mutter in der Küche geholfen. Okay? GH makes a K sound. Don't forget that. Notice that helfe also changes spelling because it's an irregular verb. I helped my mother in the kitchen. Der Onkel kommt am Freitag. Der Onkel kommt am Freitag. So the uncle is coming on Friday. Komme, there's motion, change of state. So it's going to be a form of sei. Look up komme and you'll get Der Onkel ist am Freitag komme. Der Onkel ist am Freitag komme. Here's another one of these weird verbs that doesn't get a GE. Alright? And it would have told you that in the dictionary if you used the dictionary to look it up. Die Kinder trinken viel lemonade. Die Kinder trinken viel lemonade. So the children are drinking a lot of lemonade. Trinken is our verb. Is there motion? No. Change of state or condition? No. So this is going to be a form of habe. And you're going to have to look up trinken because trinken is not a regular verb. So you would get Die Kinder haben viel lemonade getrunken. Die Kinder haben viel lemonade getrunken. Okay? When you get done with this video, you're probably thinking to yourself, holy crap, that's a lot of stuff. How am I ever going to know how to do all that? My advice to you is, first off, take a deep breath. It's not, it seems overwhelming, but it isn't. Yes, forming the present perfect tense in German and Pennsylvania Dutch has a lot of parts, and there's a lot of extra rules. Break them down. spend some time and just work with regular verbs first. They're easier. Find some regular verbs and build some past tense sentences with them. Get comfortable with that. Then, make a list of 5 or 6 irregular verbs. Build sentences with them. Become familiar, practice those. And when you work with these irregular verbs, when you figure out what the past participle is, memorize it. Say it to yourself 10 times. Ganga, 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 ganga. Gay to ganga, gay to ganga. You've got to get those memorized, okay? Then at the end, start mixing them up. Use some regulars, use some irregulars, and watch for your spelling problems, okay? Remember, spelling changes in some of these guys because they're weird. There are those extra rules. But being able to do this now greatly expands your communication abilities. Up until this video, we've only been able to talk about things in the present tense or in the future tense. Now, and that limits us. Now, when you understand this and can get a handle on this, now you are expanding your vocabulary first off, and you're also expanding your communication abilities doubly. Because now you can talk about events in the past, where before we couldn't. Now we can. Okay? So it is extremely important that you learn how to do this. And it's not the easiest thing. It takes time, it takes practice. That's up to you. Hopefully you'll set time aside and practice. Make sentences, okay? Do it the way I did. Come up with present tense sentences in Dutch, and then figure out what the past tense would be. Or go straight from English to Dutch. It doesn't matter how you go about doing it, but you need to practice, okay? Again, I've been receiving lots of emails recently, and I'm really happy for that. And what's really crazy is I've been receiving emails from all over the place, not just in the United States, a lot of foreign emails. So that's great. There are people outside the United States that are watching these videos and are getting interested in learning Pennsylvania Dutch. It blows me away. I'm really happy about that. If you have a question, a comment, a concern, a complaint, an idea for a future video, please do not hesitate and email me at this email address, busterpa@yahoo.com. And if you've only found me through the YouTube videos, all of the YouTube videos and the PowerPoints that go with all these videos and the accompanying videos can all be found at PA Dutch101 dot wikispaces, wikispaces.org. PADutch101.wikispaces.org. There you can access the videos and all the PowerPoints. You can download them to your computer so you have them right there as well. That's it for today. You can now hopefully speak about the past in Pennsylvania Dutch. Next time we'll get into a whole new grammar topic. But until then, bis die nächste Video. Mach's gut und schwätz Deutsch.